Hi everybody, I'm JJ and you're watching Reality Survival. So today I'm going to talk with you about martial law. I've done a video on this in the past and some folks contacted me and asked me to do another one that's a little shorter. I don't know if I can do it much shorter because there's a lot to explain with regard to martial law and how that works in the United States. It's like all these people are talking about martial law. It cracks me up because I remember when Obama was president, everybody was thinking, oh, the military's, Obama's not going to leave office and the military is going to impose martial law and it's going to be horrible. And now everybody's saying, well, Trump's in office and Obama's going to declare martial law and the military's awesome. They're going to save us. It just cracks me up. It's not going to happen. All right, we'll just get that out of the way right away. No chance. There's 0% chance that there will be nationwide martial law in the United States ever. It'll never ever happen. I promise you. And these aren't opinion. This is not an opinion. This is a fact. Okay, the stuff that I'm going to lay out to you is fact. The fact is that there is not enough troops to be able to do it. Period, full stop, end of story. I could just stop the video right there. I mean, it's that, there's such a degree of certainty in this that it's just not even funny, okay? But let me go into it a little bit more and explain this stuff. So, let's talk about what martial law is first. And you don't want to see it. You don't ever want to see it, all right? I promise you, you don't want to ever see it. Because it is the suspension of all civil liberties and the suspension of all civilian government. The military takes over every aspect of government. And they are not required to provide you with habeas corpus, with any of your rights under the Bill of Rights, none of that. No freedom of movement, nothing, all right? They control everything. And a lot of people will say, oh, well, no, they're going to do it just selectively. They're going to just partially do it. No, that's not how it works. All right, you just don't understand. Once martial law is declared, it's declared and it's full control. The military has full control. Now, there are other legal statuses where the military can provide assistance to law enforcement, such as they did in Katrina and those kinds of things, but what they can do and how they can operate is very limited by law. There's just no scenario where this is going to happen. I wish I could get all these QAnon people and all this kind of stuff to understand this, because there's so many people talking about it, and it's very unfortunate because it builds a false sense of hope and all this kind of stuff. We need to take responsibility for where we're at. But, all right, let's talk about logistics. So logistics is the primary reason why it's impossible, all right? And notice I didn't say improbable. It can't happen, okay? You have 100,000 cities in the United States, okay? You might be able, the United States military, all law enforcement officers, if they were to come under the jurisdiction of the military and be enlisted, basically, and all active duty and guard and reserve components, we have about 2 million people in the United States that could qualify under that umbrella. Now, you can do the math. You can do the simple math on that and how that works out. And so the first thing you have to realize is that for every one troop that you have standing on the corner, in a street corner somewhere, imposing this martial law, right? Doing searches, on trucks and enforcing curfews and checking papers and all this kind of stuff, right? You've got 5 people behind him supporting him with food and laundry and clothing and weapons and vehicles and all the kinds of things that happen out there. Because I think a lot of people think that if you're in the military, then you're trained on how to do all this stuff. That's not true. That's not true. You know, there's probably 80% or better of the career fields in military are a civilian equivalency job, like a network administrator or a secretary or a chow hall clerk or whatever, maintenance, transportation, you know, all that kind of stuff. The vast majority of people in our armed services do not have any experience or any qualification to be in the field working to establish martial law somewhere. They just don't, all right? And that's just the reality of the world. And even more so, you have to think about the geography and how the bases are spread out, and the fact that a base can't just get up and mobilize and go operate out in the field all on its own when it hasn't been pre-prepared to do that, all right? And our bases have not been pre-prepared to do that. There are some units that can, the infantry units and the cavalry units and the different, those kinds of units. But the vast majority of them are set up to be, to get all their support and their logistics from their home base. And they don't have a capability to be able to move all that forward into the field. Now you'll say, some people will say, well, we deploy all over the world and we work. Yeah, we do, in very small numbers. This very small chunk of the military actually goes forward. All right, it's not everybody. And there's a lot of time and planning involved in getting all those resources over there and all that kind of stuff. It's not anything that can just happen in a couple of days or a couple of weeks or whatever the case may be. We plan for that kind of stuff for years, and we have those operations, pretty well thought out where we're going to be and all that kind of stuff. So think about Iraq. Iraq was 27 million people, roughly, right? We couldn't control anything in Iraq. I mean, we could barely control the green zone in downtown in Baghdad, right? It's a small section of Baghdad, and it was never completely safe. There were times when it was safer than others, but it was never completely safe, even inside the green zone, all right? Now, let alone all the forward operating bases and all that kind of stuff that were continually getting attacked. The world's premier military, which I have worked for 24 years, okay? We had control at times, and we had control in certain areas for certain amounts of time, but the whole place was never secured. And it was roughly, what is Iraq? Roughly, maybe the size of Texas, probably smaller, probably more like North Carolina or something like that. It's not a huge country at all. It's probably smaller than Texas. And we couldn't ever secure it, all right? So we can't do that here, all right? The number of weapons in our country and the insurgency that we would face is so much more significant than it is in Iraq. It's not even on the same scale at all. 150 or so million gun owners in the country. And here's the other aspect to this. There's not a military commander or military leader anywhere that is in their sound mind, I'm going to caveat this, that has a sound mind, who would want to attempt to do martial law in the United States, especially anybody who's currently active and currently serving, because they understand that it is the world's worst option for a military to do that. Why do I say that? You say, oh, well, they get all the control. They also get all the headaches. All right, logistically, like I said, it's a freaking unbelievable nightmare. It is also the most delicate military operation that you can ever try to pull off. You have to strive a balance between being able to keep people happy and allowing services to be utilized to a certain extent, just enough to keep them happy, but enough where you also maintain security and control, okay? So a lot of people will say, oh, well, we can use drones and we can use tanks and all this kind of stuff, and it'll be easy to implement. You can't be heavy-handed in martial law, all right? You can't do it, because what happens is you fuel an insurgency and you make your security problems worse, all right? So if it's just, all it would do is it would start a full-on revolt, okay? If you had a somewhat docile population and you started being heavy-handed in the things that you're doing, then it's just gonna cause a revolt to make it even worse. All right, it's a nightmare. There's no situation in which martial law ever turns out wonderful. All right, let's see. The other thing to consider is that when it's been used in the past, actual martial law in our country after the Civil War, it was declared unconstitutional. Right, so you're not going to find any support for using it now and being able to get it instituted and those kinds of things. The only time it's allowed is during times of insurrection and uprising and all that kind of stuff. And people will say, well, it is insurrection because the Democrats stole the elections and all that kind of stuff. That's not insurrection. It's fraud, all right? It's fraud. It's criminal activity, but it's also criminal activity that is left to the states to deal with, and they have the capacity to do so. They just didn't. And that goes to the video that I did the other day talking about us getting involved so that we can influence those kind of decisions, but that's another topic altogether. Let's see, what else with martial law? There's really a bazillion things, and I probably should have written some notes on this. So you can't be too heavy-handed. You have to control. You have to have a high degree of control. Oh, and the other thing, here's the big one too. A lot of people, a lot of conservatives, quote unquote conservatives, are kind of cheering this on like they want it to happen. And I really don't understand that, because the military is not going to be able to differentiate between a Democrat or a Republican while they're out there in the streets trying to enforce this. Everybody is going to be treated, if this was where they were to attempt it, everybody would be treated as heavily handed as the next person, as heavy-handed as the next person. It's not going to be you're not going to get a cuddly, soft, well, you're a conservative, then you go right ahead and your business can open and you can go ahead and get your truck through here. That's fine. We're not going to worry about smuggling or anything like that. But oh, you're a Democrat. Oh, well, we're gonna be hard on you. You can't go anywhere or whatever. That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Everybody is going to be treated with the same degree of suspicion, and you're all going to have to live with a complete nightmare if it were to happen. It might be able to happen in 10 cities. Maybe. And I stress that would only be a partial degree of control. They wouldn't be able to even do full control in 5 cities, big cities. Maybe they could get partial degree in 10 different cities. And that would be pulling the the biggest trump card out of their ass. I mean, it's so not possible. It's the military is it's a big moving beast. It takes a lot of time and a lot of tension on logistics, and it's not as nimble and as agile and as capable as a lot of people think. All right. There's tons of problems with doing this, and I wish I could spell them all out for you better. What else is there? Oh, foreign governments. People will talk about foreign governments getting involved, and the UN and NATO and all this kind of stuff. Well, the United Nations probably has, last I looked, I think it was like 85,000 troops or something like that. Maybe they've doubled it. Let's say they've got 160,000 or 170 or 200,000 now, which is probably not true. But let's just give it the benefit of the doubt. That doesn't add anything to the equation. All it does is fire up the civilian populace to create an even bigger insurgency, right? So that is another problem. Any NATO troops or UN troops or whatever that show, there's not enough of them. All the NATO troops combined, if they moved all of their militaries here, again, they run into the same logistical issues that we do, right? In being able to do that. And their problem is even worse because they don't have the transports and the aircraft and all that kind of stuff that are equipped and able to move troops and equipment and all that kind of stuff as well as we do, right? We couldn't do it either. Trying to impose martial law over there is a huge hassle, right? Just like it was with Iraq. It was a massive pain in the ass. And so and the other thing you have to remember is you still have to have your bases in the United States continuously operating because the equipment breaks when it's in the field and it has to go back and it has to get repaired. So now your force is split. You can't just abandon your whole base and bring everybody out into the cities. They have to still maintain security at those bases. They have to still be able to repair the aircraft, the tanks, and the trucks and the Humvees and all that kind of stuff. They still have to be able to do all the things they normally do on a day-to-day basis. And that's why when we deploy, we only deploy a small amount of the force so that the rest of the force can stay back and be continuing. Then you also have to figure in rest and recuperation time, training time because of attrition and all these kinds of things. You know, those people can't all be in the field, right? You've got people that are retiring and all that kind of stuff, and you've got, you know, you got to bring in new troops, and so they have to have time to train, and they have to go to advanced tech schools and different things like that. Like this is an extraordinarily complex process, even for the United States here, right here in the U.S., let alone some other country bringing troops over here because they have all the same issues to deal with, and their equipment's not as good, their transport's not as good, they're not as well organized in many cases. And they don't have the experience doing it like we do in many cases as well. So that's really, it's a non-starter also, okay? That's not gonna happen as well. Oh, okay. So the next thing is, would the troops do it? Would the troops even do it? So you've got about 85% of the force, roughly, that is conservative, Constitution, believes in the Constitution, the rule of law, and all those kinds of things. So you're not going to be able to convince them to suspend everybody's civil rights and civil liberties, to go and be heavy-handed with the civilian population. All right, that's never going to happen. It just isn't. You might be able to get some people to do it, and people will say, well, what about Katrina? They were doing all this stuff. Well, look, in Katrina, it was a rescue operation, all right? Whether you like to admit it or not, things had to be done. They had to move people and get things done so that the recovery effort could start and so that people wouldn't be in danger and all those kinds of things, all right? It was a short-term operation. There's not still troops in Katrina, and there wasn't for very long. It was a short-term deal. And there was a clearly defined mission. They knew what they had to do and all those kinds of things, right? And don't start with the gun confiscation because 97% of people who had guns confiscated got a hand receipt and they got their guns back. There were a few percent of people who lost their weapons because of actual loss, and they were compensated for those weapons. So don't even start. Okay, so earlier, we made the assumption that law enforcement officers would go along with this as well. That would never happen. Roughly 750,000 sworn law enforcement officers in this country there's no way that the vast majority of them would be okay with instituting martial law anywhere. It just wouldn't happen. It just wouldn't happen. You would see sheriffs all over the country raise militias to fight against this and to keep it from happening. All right, the vast majority of counties in the United States are red counties. Each one of those counties has an elected sheriff who represents the will of the people. And those sheriffs would put together a massive block to something like this. They would never allow this to stand, all right? And the same thing goes, there's tons of police chiefs and all that kind of stuff that are all like-minded. You might be able to get some law enforcement officers to go along with it in blue areas where there are more liberal police and more draconian who are okay with being more heavy-handed. with citizens' rights and those kinds of things. But if you look at the electoral map, which is what, 95% of the country that's red, all those red counties, not going to go for it. They're not going to go for it. There's no way. There's no way that would happen. All right. So anyway, I don't even know how long I've gone. I'm sure there's about a million other things that I could talk about with this on why it can't happen, but I can't remember them right now. So it's fine. We'll just leave that as it may. But it is 13 January 2021. I guarantee you, there is not going to be any martial law. There's not going to be any nationwide power blackouts or anything like that. None of this crap that QAnon and all that kind of stuff is saying is going to happen. It's not going to happen. I guarantee it. There might be civil unrest. Okay, I'll give you that for sure. There might be, clashes between groups, and it might be a pretty bumpy ride over the next 24 months. There might be some supply chain shortages. There might be, lots of different crappy scenarios could potentially play out over the next 24 months. And I give you that 100%. It's not like there's no reason to prep. There's plenty of reason to prep, okay? Plenty, always. Even in normal, peaceful times, there's plenty of reasons to be prepared. But you don't have to worry about your own military coming and imposing martial law. And you certainly shouldn't cheer it on, okay? You don't want that. I'm telling you, you don't want that. It is a bad situation all the way around. You don't want it. So stop cheering it on and stop acting like it's going to happen and stop spreading fake news and getting people's hopes up and all that kind of stuff. This situation that we've gotten ourselves in is our fault. It is our fault. You can say that it's not, but that's just not the reality of the situation. That one other thing I guess I wanted to point out for the two people that are still watching this is that as preppers, we are what I would call a catastrophist, right? We have an innate ability to see how things can fall apart quickly and how they may not last, right? And that's good to have those kinds of people in society because it helps people to think about the what ifs and all that kind of stuff, to build in precautions and backups and all that kind of stuff. The problem with catastrophists is that we also suffer severely from confirmation bias. Now, the rest of society who are not catastrophists, they suffer severely from normalcy bias, where they think everything's normal, it's all going to keep going on. Catastrophists look at everything and we're like, man, we can see a failure here and here and here and here and here. Our problem, though, is we suffer from confirmation bias. And that means that when we're looking around the interwebs and we see information and all that kind of stuff, and we see something talking about a disaster, pick your disaster or pick your ending, whatever you want, then we look at it and we go, oh, ooh, that one's gonna go. See, I had that one in my head and he's talking about it too. That's confirmation bias, so I believe that to be true. And I think that's gonna happen. And that's what, I've been doing this YouTube thing for, what, 10 years now. This will be my 10th year. And we've had lots of disasters in that 10-year period that were supposed to end the world, and they didn't. And this isn't going to either. It's going to all keep going. It's going to keep going, and it's going to keep going, and it's going to keep going. We're not at the end, all right? We're just not there. A quick study of the Revolutionary War would help people understand a little bit better on how much tyranny they were suffering back then. It was much worse than what we have now, in orders of magnitude worse, and for longer periods, okay? 15 years of continuous tyranny, tax after tax after tax after tax after tax, put on everything that they did, every sheet of paper, every little bit of, every tea bag, England was sucking the life out of the colonies to pay for their wars for a long time. And people finally got upset with it. But they tried everything first, all right? They tried everything, and we haven't tried everything. We have not saturated the government, all the local positions, and all the election boards and the election commissions and all those kinds of things the same way that the liberals did. And again, that was discussed in that last video. So, it's just my opinion. We're not there yet. Anyhow, don't let confirmation bias skew your understanding of reality. If you go seeking things out and you find that information and it just feeds, it hits you, that gives you that dopamine hit that, oh, I knew I was right. You need to put that in check so that you can understand the real world. You know, I think that's why I call this channel Reality Survival, because so many people in this community, and not everybody, there's a lot of people who watch who are very well grounded. So I'm not talking to you if that's you, but there are a lot of people in this community that don't have a solid footing on what reality is. And that's dangerous. It's very, very dangerous. In my opinion, conspiracy theorists and people who get all wrapped up in all this QAnon stuff and everything like that are far more dangerous than just about any other crowd, because they'll believe anything. And people who will believe anything can be led astray very easily. And that is what's happening all across the nation right now. It's proof in the pudding. So don't buy into all this stuff. It's just not a good idea. Anyway, thanks for watching. You can go ahead and blow me up in the comments. I'll probably just turn them off because I don't really care to hear anybody's explanation or anything like that, because what I'm telling you is fact. It is an opinion. It's fact.